There was something interesting I heard. Let me pick the microphone up. Come on. Up you come. You sit right there. There's an interesting bit tonight on the coverage of the Leafs game I saw. But there's something weird about it. So I want to get into that because the idea that Wayne Gretzky could have been a Leaf in 1996 is fascinating. But the idea that the Leafs weren't already on the downswing in 96 is even more fascinating. The way that they made it sound was Gretzky should have come to the Leafs, but he didn't because the team was being cheap. And that's why they died off. Not exactly. So let's take a look. Thankfully, of course, I've got the 96-97 yearbook from the Hockey News. And this is why I keep these old magazines. So we can take a look back. And then I'm going to look into some trades. More than ever, it seems like the ghost of former eccentric owner Harold Ballard is lurking in the corridors of Maple Leaf Gardens. After 2 seasons of success under GM Cliff Fletcher and coach Pat Burns, things soured for the Maple Leafs in 94-95 and got downright messy last season. Burns was fired, the club finished below 500 for the first time in 5 years, and Fletcher was the target of criticism because of a series of questionable trades. On the ice, an expensive, veteran-laden squad had more excuses than answers and was bounced by the Blues in a first-round six-game playoff defeat. Off the ice, grocery store manager Steve Stavro tightened his grip on the franchise in a highly controversial takeover. When it later appeared Stavro was also instrumental in several trades, notably the reacquisition of Wendell Clark, it became more and more difficult to figure out who was calling the shots. All of this helped create a Ballard-like circus atmosphere around the Gardens with veterans Mike Gartner, Dave Gagne, and Todd Gill expunged in a wave of cost-cutting. And with untested rookies expected to jump in and help immediately, the road for new coach Mike Murphy could be bumpy. Salvation could lie in career seasons from Doug Gilmour, Matt Sundin, and Felix Potvin. Sundin, in particular, needs to reach a new level after playing well in his first 2 years as a Leaf, but failing to achieve lofty expectations. So let's take a look here. So they were 34, 36, and 12 going into this free agent period. Okay, they were 13th overall, 3rd in the Central. They lost to St. Louis 4-2. Their power play was 10th at 18.9. Their power play, or their penalty killing, was 82.6% for 11th. So 10th on the power play, 11th on the penalty kill. Off-season acquisitions: Jamie Baker at center, and coach Mike Murphy. Candidates for promotion: Sergei Berezin, Freddie Modine, and Jeff Ware. 3 pivotal factors. Stability in the lineup. By design or necessity, the lineup has been in a constant state of turmoil the past 2 seasons. Fletcher's engineered trade after trade, often to correct past errors. Players such as Gagne would arrive, then begin worrying immediately if they were headed out. The result has been uncertainty, particularly among club's youngsters, who were rarely given time to prove their value. They may take their lumps early, but the Leafs have to settle things down. 2. Play of youngsters. To understand how much the Leafs are counting on kids this season, consider unproven Russian winger Sergei Berezin, 24, is being asked to replace prolific veteran Mike Gartner, who led the Leafs in goals last season with 35. Swedish rookie Freddie Modine has been penciled in, although he was hardly a star in Sweden, while Todd Warner, 22, and Brandon Convery, 22, will be asked to improve efforts up front. On defense, Matt Martin, 25, should be ready, but bumping junior Jeff Ware, 19, up to the NHL already may be a stretch. Number 3, Gilmour's contribution. After averaging 1.4 points per game in his first 2 full seasons in Toronto, the Leaf captain, his production has fallen drastically to 0.84 points per match the past 2 campaigns. As a result, Toronto's offense has been on the skids. Is Gilmour a 127-point center as he was in 92-93, or a 72-point center as he was last season? It's important to set the bar here. So, Matt Sundin led the team in scoring with 83 points in 76 games. I'm not sure why the article in here says he hasn't lived up to expectations. Gilmour does have 72 points in 81 games. Murphy, 61 points in 82 games. Wendell Clark had 15 points in 13 games after being traded for with the Islanders. We'll get into that in a minute. Gartner had 54 points in 82 games. He had 35 goals and 19 assists. Matthew Schneider, 54 points in 78, 7 points in 13 with Toronto. Dave Gagne, 22 points in 28 games with Toronto after coming over from Dallas. Kirk Muller had 25 points in 36 games after coming over from the Islanders. Then they have Todd Gill, Dave Ellett, Mike Craig, Todd Warner, Wayne Presley came over from the Rangers, had 4 points in 19 games. Ty Domi, Dmitry Yushkevich, I know how to pronounce it, I just forgot. Nick Kyprios had 2 points in 19 games after the trade from the Rangers. Peter White came over and played 1 game after the trade from Edmonton. Paul DiPietro, Jamie McCowan, Brandon Convery, Mark Kolasar, Zdenek Nedved, Don Beaupre, who played 8 games after the trade from Ottawa, Kelly Fairchild, Rob Zettler, David Harlock, Sean Haggerty, Jamie Heward, Matt Martin, and Felix Potvin. And Potvin played 69 games. So there you go. There's Toronto. So where would Gretzky have fit into that? Realistically. Let's take a look at what was going on there too. When they traded for Don Beaupre and Kirk Muller from the Islanders. So the Islanders get him from Ottawa. They don't keep him. They trade him to Toronto. They get back Ken Belanger and Damian Rhodes. So Muller, that's not bad. Dave Gagne comes in from the Stars for Benoit Hogue and Randy Wood. Mike Pomictor is picked up from Chicago for cash. Nick Kyprios was picked up from the Rangers for Bill Berg. Wayne Presley was picked up along with Nick Kyprios. Oh, this is one trade. Nick Kyprios and Wayne Presley for Bill Berg and Sergio Momesso. They listed them as separate trades and then together for some reason. Dave Andrechuk was traded out by Toronto to New Jersey for Marek Posmic and Christian Antilla. Now, at the time that he was traded by Toronto, because you have to get perspective on this, he played 61 games, 20 goals, 24 assists, 44 points, and in New Jersey he had 13 points in 15 games. So Andrechuk was on the downside, and Toronto knew this, so they traded him off. Wendell Clark came back in a trade which they've also acquired Matthew Schneider and DJ Smith. They traded out Sean Haggerty, Darby Hendrickson, Kenny Johnson, and a number 1 pick. Guess who that number 1 pick turned out to be? Yeah, it was Roberto Luongo. So that hurts a lot. A 4th round pick was acquired from Anaheim for Ken Baumgartner. That 4th rounder never made it. Jamie Baker was acquired with a 5th round pick for Todd Gill. Mike Gartner was acquired in June of 96. No, that's wrong. That's listed wrong. That is totally listed wrong. Let me just take a quick look here. Yeah, no. He ended up in Phoenix after that. Yeah, they traded him to Arizona. Mike Lankshire was the guy they picked up for Dave Gagne going to Calgary. Darby Hendrickson came in. So, the point that I'm making here is, they really had a disastrous team going on. And then in 97, right after this, Doug Gilmour and Dave Ellett and a 4th round pick go to Jersey for Jason Smith, Steve Sullivan, and the rights to Alan McCauley. So with all of that going on with Toronto, I can understand the cost cutting. This was a team that was spending a lot more money on their roster than they were getting back in terms of production on the ice and wins. So when you're spending a lot more money than the guy down the street, and he's getting a much better product for what he's paying for, you're going to want some cost cutting. And when they say, hey, we want to go out and get Gretzky, you're going to go, yeah, no. Rangers. In the city that doesn't sleep, this is worth looking at. Patience isn't high on the list of virtues. New York sports fans demand excellence, and they demand it now. I don't think you can rebuild in New York, says Rangers GM Neil Smith. At least if you do, you have to do it in the back of the house where nobody can see it. So, faced with an aging team in midsummer that was somewhere between contender and pretending status, Smith had to decide which direction to take. The signing of the greatest scorer in NHL history indicated the Rangers are serious about ending their latest Stanley Cup drought at 2 years. While Gretzky, 35, is no longer in his prime, he is still dangerous and enters a situation where he isn't necessarily the go-to guy. The Rangers possess a strong core led by Captain Mark Messier, who probably has one more highly productive year left in his 35-year-old body. And with defenseman Brian Leetch, goalie Mike Richter, and left winger Adam Graves all in their primes, the Rangers have the nucleus to threaten again. Whether or not they do may be in the hands of the supporting cast. If veteran defensemen Ulf Samuelsson and Bruce Driver can pick it up after an inconsistent first seasons in Ranger blue, if unscrutable forward Alex Kovalev can ever focus that embarrassment of talent, And if left winger Luc Robitaille reappears after a poor season, then maybe the Rangers will prove you don't have to rebuild after all. So, yeah. Those Rangers. There's one thing I have to look up here. So, in terms of how things went for the Rangers after this deal went through, after they got the great one, he gets 97 points in the first season in 82 games. He plays 15 playoff games, he gets 10 goals, 10 assists, 20 points. But the Rangers didn't make the playoffs the next 2 seasons. And it was over those next 2 seasons that we finally saw his game start to show some real signs of degradation, and he's out of the league. My point is this. Looking back at 96, for Leafs fans and saying, oh, we started to become mediocre, and the whole Gretzky thing was a big part of it. It wasn't. Gretzky joining the Leafs wouldn't have stopped a sinking ship. The thing that I laughed at was, I think it was Paul Romanuk doing the voiceover, where he said, if you have Gilmour, Sundin, and Gretzky down the middle, that would have been formidable. That would have been awful. One of the three would have been getting very little ice time. One of the three would have probably had to move to the wing. It's not feasible that Gretzky drops to a number 3 center. It's not feasible that Gilmour drops to number 3. Gilmour was out by February of the following season. Partly because his production had dropped. And just having Sundin, Gretzky, and Gilmour together wouldn't have made them a contender, because Felix Potvin was starting to be exposed as a mediocre goaltender. He wasn't long for Toronto after that either. The Toronto Maple Leafs in 96-97 started showing even more signs that they weren't that great. The funny part is, too, when you look at the 96-97 season and what happened for Montreal. For Toronto, Sergei Berezin committed at 25 goals, 41 points. Muller had 37 points, had 20 goals. Ty Domi actually had an offensive season that wasn't too bad at 11 goals, 17 assists. Wendell Clark put up 30 goals the season following. And to say, well, Stavro had a lot to do with Wendell Clark coming back. Well, that's good, because Wendell had 30 goals the year after. Matt Sundin had 94 points. Doug Gilmour had 60 points in 61 games, only 15 of them goals at the time of the trade. And what they got back wasn't necessarily enough for a man of the stature of Gilmour, but still, I really think that to say, well, if Gretzky had come in, it would have changed everything. When you've got a goaltender who's got a .908 save percentage in Potvin, which was okay, but he played 74 games, and he ended up with a record of 27-36. I don't think adding Gretzky changes anything for the Maple Leafs that year. And I don't think avoiding trading out a guy like Gartner would have helped the Leafs either. Just having names doesn't make you good. Look at the Rangers. That's why I read what the Rangers were doing at the time they got Gretzky. The Rangers were trying to keep all the names together, all the veterans. We got to have all these veterans. We can't rebuild. Toronto had been doing that. They peaked in 93 and 94, and it had started to fall apart already. Adding Gretzky, it might have buoyed them to an extra, I'll give them 5 wins. But the amount of controversy that it would have stirred. Because Sundin would have always been looking over his shoulder. Look, Toronto fans love having a hero. Gretzky would have been the ultimate hero. More so than what Matthews is now. Because Gretzky was the great one. He was the ultimate hockey player. And Toronto fans would have loved seeing him out there. So, in a game when they're down 3-2. They don't want to see Matt Sundin on the ice. It would have been Gretzky they would have wanted on the ice. And as reactionary as things sometimes get in Toronto, they would have got it. Or the coach could have got desperate and gone to Gretzky. Matt Sundin probably doesn't have that 94-point season. And then when Toronto becomes relevant again, in the early 2000s, with Matt Sundin as the central figure, well, if you had Gretzky in 96, that may never have happened. So to look back at 96 and go, oh, Gretzky should have been a Leaf. Yeah, and you may never have had the team that was led by Sundin in the early 2000s. you may never have had it. It didn't help the Rangers. The Rangers didn't become Stanley Cup contenders with Gretzky. They had one good year with Gretzky. 10 goals, 10 assists, 20 points in 15 playoff games. All is well. Problem is, that's 15 playoff games, not 25. The Rangers didn't go to the final. The Rangers didn't win anything that year. And then the following 2 seasons, they missed the playoffs because they kept adding more and more veteran players to try to fix the problem. Oh, well, let's just throw Kamensky out. Oh, let's just throw in Fleury. Let's just keep... Oh, we'll bring some guys back. It doesn't work. Can you imagine if a team was doing that now, just throwing in more and more veteran players, guys who are 35 and older to try to turn around a team that's starting to fall? We would skewer them. Gretzky at 35 was not the same Gretzky he'd been at 30 or at 25. He'd played a lot of hockey. And while he was still one of the most gifted players in the league, I really don't think he would have turned the Leafs around. So that's my opinion on Gretzky not joining the team in '96. I don't see it as this doom and gloom thing that was presented during the broadcast tonight. That, oh, if he joined Toronto, oh, and then they faded into obscurity. Yeah, for like 3 years. And then they were back under the leadership of Matt Sundin, the best leader the Leafs have had in my lifetime. Absolutely the best leader the Leafs have had in my lifetime. And if you bring in Gretzky, that might never have happened. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.